This gospel is quite puzzling. The first part, somewhat less so, but still fairly demanding. Master, I will follow you wherever you go. Now the Lord addresses what he obviously sees to be the issue straight away. He's talking to a scribe who would have therefore been well secured in his moorings, in his status, his position, his identity. All this would be ejected like that, should he opt for this. Foxes have holes, and the birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head, which has been picked up by many saints over the centuries as a clue. Freedom. Free to fly. A bird does not spend time constructing a huge property from which he can't escape. It's true that they have to build nests so as to have their young. It's true also that certain birds like robins are territorial, but yet they're not stuck to the ground. The Son of Man also is free, and on another occasion he does say that he has to go on to the other towns to preach the gospel there, for it is for that he came, giving a model to itinerant preachers in the centuries to come. But specifically the question not having a place to lay his head has been picked up by many saints as regards the fact that if one believes in the promises, then that gamble can be made, that some are actually called not to have a permanent home or anywhere they can call their moorings. They want to really be free to blow wherever the Spirit sends them. And that actually is specific to Ireland in the past. Peregrinatio, propter Christum, that this extra bit of interior penance was taken on voluntarily, exile, so that the familiar was deliberately sacrificed, including language, parents, ties, and what was in any way a comfort zone. It led to movement. We have several waves of movement, as we know. Columkill going up to Iona, and then from Iona things going to the north of Scotland, England, and over to the continent, and that huge Irish presence on the continent. And also in subsequent generations, in the wave of evangelization, when the known world was expanding, the Irish are present. A huge number were free to move, and that meant staying there, because travel in the early stages was not what it is now. But it involves internal penance, if we're honest. But then the second one has caused quite a bit of ink to flow amongst commentators. It's really surprising. Sir, let me go and bury my father first. Follow me. Okay, that's acceptable. But what about this next bit? And leave the dead to bury their dead. What was the meaning of that? Some commentators would explain a possible avenue of pursuit as follows. That actually the person was dying, and there was going to be therefore a certain uncertainty as regards the operation of concluding his existence and all that had to follow. It could be that the Lord, in that specific context, we do not know the context, would have been saying, the grace is there in the air, if you miss it now, you won't get it again. And that is valid, perennially valid in vocation work. On that one, as novice master, I would have been in agreement with the prior that if a young man, even at 18, is coming to us, knowing what he wants and stable, then we take that gamble and let him in. Why? it's easier, even if they're perhaps somewhat immature on some levels, to hand them over to the Lord pure and clean, malleable, than to collect the bits from a human wreckage at 25. And by the way, it's the method that, if we're honest, has worked in the past. It was applied also in more recent times by the legionaries of Christ, and had, on the level of numbers at least, a spectacular success. The thing is that novice masters know that if one takes a person in that first freshness of fervour, love, and as the Lord himself says in the Apocalypse, in the message to Ephesus, you have lost your first love, then one has actually the chance of being able to work hand in hand with the Holy Spirit, who was already greatly at work at an early age, precisely to propel them, and before they've been distracted by other things which then have to be weeded out. And by the way, nowadays it's actually more complex, because to find a soul that is not already contaminated is becoming increasingly difficult, because whereas children before, in even good families, were fairly okay, now in the same, they can, if we're not careful, have access to what's going to damage them profoundly at an early age. And it's not the same always. All that to be aware that there is, right now, a need for supernatural vision of what is involved in vocation. Just the other month, I was talking at length to a young Norbertine who speaks Welsh there. We were together to discuss the question of what's going on in Wales, and he came out with this, and he knows what he's talking about because he'd worked for years as factotum in the cathedral in Westminster. He said in Welsh, they know it, but they can't admit it officially. The truth is this: it's only in the traditional families and backgrounds that the vocations are successful. That's a simplification of things, but he meant that it's only there that what has worked in the past still works. Pure souls worked upon by grace and followed through when the grace is there. I remember when I was 18, because I wanted to enter at that point Privilege Abbey, which was near us, the novice master saying, if we send them away when they want to come at 18 to university, we tend to find they don't come back. So he was aware of it as well. The thing is, this insistence of many on having completeness of experience before one tries the divine is somewhat human. It's not at least complete, because it's putting the priesthood and vocation in the same domain as any other job. Here we have to do with someone who, if he's called, is going to be amongst the angels at the altar. And what pleases the angels more than another angel? Not contaminated or wrecked first, but having loved simply one and lived for that. Because also the novice master knows that it's the young ones often who are most open to the new graces, and you can tell them anything, they'll believe you and follow it through. And therefore they're capable of great sanctity in the early stages. The fervour of the novice is proverbial. And by the way, that makes the difference. Why? Because if they have had, in the early stages, the love encounter, the mystic encounter, the true encounter with a friend, and not just a body of teaching, then they have what's going to keep them on track until they meet that love. In other words, a relationship. And that is the bit that cannot be replaced by any human programming. No matter what session one sends them on, if that's not there, it's all cosmetic. And therefore, follow me means meet me. Attach yourself to my person, for the Lord is a magnet, and on him must the eyes of the candidate be focused. And therefore, in that context, one leaves what can wait to those who have time. There's an urgency in the oomph. I just conclude in a beautiful homily on the journey of our Blessed Lady to her cousin St. Elizabeth. St. Bede the Venerable has one profound line. That divine grace knows of no tardy postponings. Tartamonimina. And it's the basis of all retreat work and vocation work. When the grace is there, one grasps it, and one leaves the dead to bury their dead.